Philanthropy, a love of mankind, the desire to promote the welfare of others. 75 years ago, a small group of people came together out of a shared sense of concern for the welfare of the people and communities of the southwestern United States, and their legacy has been a unique gift for the region they all loved. We know that legacy today as Philanthropy Southwest.
You know, I think the legacy that I'd like to see Philanthropy Southwest in the next 75 years is one that is innovative, one that fosters deep, meaningful philanthropy in a way that is actually changing society and solving really big, pressing issues that we in the Southwest are facing. And the vision is to try to get as many philanthropists as possible, many foundations as possible working together. We feel like there's a similarity that goes throughout the Southwest and a culture that's a part of us that's different from the rest of the country.
The core values of Philanthropy Southwest are rooted in the core values that brought those first founders together in 1949. A group with elements of compassion and with ingredients of love, which has brought a fellowship of caring people.
Speaking of the Conference of Southwest Foundations, that to us has been such a valuable association because it has given us friends we can talk with who are, if we're crazy in doing this, they're crazy too. And that's very reassuring.
It came together seemingly by happenstance, but the notion behind an organization of foundations, sharing knowledge and learning together, was one that had long been waiting for just the right confluence of people to come to the same realization.
Well, the reason I remember it is that every morning I walked from my house to my husband's business on Congress Avenue. And as we went through the campus, we often saw professors. And we saw Dr. Sutherland, and without my understanding of what was going to happen, the question was said to Dr. Sutherland, how can we as unknowing handle a small family foundation? How can we get advice as to how to use this money in the most productive fashion? And Dr. Sutherland said, I waited a long time, I had this idea on my mind, and I think we can get others that have the same query, the same unease about what to do. And so the first person he turned to was Mrs. H.E. Butt.
Dr. Robert Sutherland was a quiet, thoughtful man who had long been concerned about making philanthropy more effective and impactful, especially given the amount of wealth created in the Southwest in the post-war years. He found like-minded champions in Lemuel and Margaret Scarborough and Mrs. Mary Butt. Together, they quickly formed a deep bond and started formulating the idea that would become the organization we know today.
Mary Butt felt like that there was no problem out there that you could let go. You had to try to do something about it. If you knew about it, you had to make an effort to make it better. And maybe you couldn't solve it, but you had to try and you had to make an effort.
Maud Keeling was originally Dr. Sutherland's assistant, but she quietly became a force in her own right, guiding the forerunner of PSW, the Council of Southwest Foundations, for its first 50 years of growth.
Maud Keeling was bigger than her stature. She just was full of life, could get along with everybody, and loved convening and creating an environment for good conversation and discourse.
Oh yeah, Maud Keeling was the heart and soul of the early CSF. And then she was replaced by Lucille DiDomenico during my tenure. And both of those women were dynamite. They knew every nuance, they knew every problem. They could put you in touch with anybody across the nation. They were invaluable, those two women.
PSW met a deep-seated need across the region, and the organization quickly grew in membership and influence. It was a model on which other philanthropic serving organizations were based. During her tenure at PSW, Lucille DiDomenico ushered in a new era of renewal and innovation, centered on education, peer-to-peer learning, and helping foundations make the transition from original founders to new board and staff leadership.
Maud and I became very close friends very quickly, and I'll tell you how that happened. So I had the chairman of the board flanking me on the right and the incoming chairman of the board on the left, and we flew to Corpus Christi, got off the plane, and there was Maud to greet us because they wanted to be present when I met Maud. In case there was any possible friction, they wanted to be there to take care of that. The board was pretty anxious about this because Maud could have stayed on for 100 years. She really didn't want to leave. So what they didn't know is that Maud had called me as soon as I was hired and introduced herself, and we became friends over the phone. Well, I didn't tell them this, and they had no idea. So we get off the plane, and we walk toward Maud, and Maud and I go like this, and just wrap each other in each other's arms. That's what women do, So it was great from the start.
One thing that has been constant over the last 75 years is how PSW has been a trusted partner and one quickly recommended to the next generation of leadership.
The Merrick Foundation was created by my grandfather in 1948. It was one of the first foundations created in Oklahoma. And the story goes he was very involved in the creation of Philanthropy Southwest. And he enjoyed going. He was a joiner. He liked conferences. He liked organizing things. Growing up, seeing the boom and the bust of the oil business, and Ardmore was clearly an oil and gas town. The foundations in town, when things were bad in the oil and gas business, really stepped up and helped the city grow, both in social service and cultural activities. And so growing up in that environment, it made me know that foundations are important, not only to big cities, but to small towns. When my grandfather retired, my dad took over along with his sister, Elizabeth Coe, and both were involved in Philanthropy Southwest. When I moved home after school to take over our family business, what came along with that job was taking over the management of the Merrick Foundation, and that was in 1980. And that's when I first went to my first conference, and there I met Michael Meadow, and we just became fast friends. And I look forward to going back to every conference since then, catching up with old friends. We're now in the fourth generation that's been involved, and it's just a wonderful organization that's doing great for our industry.
In 1943, Madison Cooper started the Cooper Foundation to improve the lives of Waco. As I understand it, the Cooper Foundation was one of the original members of the Conference of Southwest Foundation. Madison Cooper, I believe, got involved, I think, as soon as he could, seeing the value of talking to other funders and learning best practices and developing relationships around the state and now the region. And every one of his successors has stayed involved and been a leader in the organization.
Hopwoodsell Foundation was started in 1942.
My dad began working as an usher in theaters back in 1928. And the theater business was Mr. Hopwoodsell's primary business at the time. And Mr. Hopwoodsell recognized a hardworking young man and said, would you come and be my executive assistant? And from that opportunity, my dad worked for Carl Hopwoodsell for several decades, and he ran the day-to-day operations from the late 60s until 86. My dad discovered, I don't know the details, that there was this organization called Southwest Foundation, which was the only organization of the kind in the country. And so it was very important to Hopwoodsell to have that in partnership.
So the very first person who reached out to me was Katie Robbins from the Hopwoodsell Foundation. We did not have a database system. We did not have a grant system. And Katie, I called her very next day. She's like, come on over. Pulled up a chair next to her at her desk, and she showed me her system and showed me how they work things.
I feel that I'm still a relative newbie in the philanthropy world, just being on board, 6 or 7 years. I really enjoy the annual conference and just getting to meet people that have been in philanthropy way longer than I have and learn from them.
Katie then introduced me to Tony over here at Philanthropy Southwest, and that led into just a whole wealth of new resources and opportunities for the Addy Foundation to grow, expand, and learn from our peers.
Linda Evans, who was very active years ago, she's with the Meadows Foundation, was a friend of mine. And she kept going, you need to come to this group. We have lunch about every other month and talk about all sorts of stuff. And that would have never happened if it had been for PSW.
My predecessor was Elizabeth Smith, and she was the executive director at Cooper Foundation for 18 years. And during that time served on multiple committees, and then she served as the chair of the board of, at that time, the Conference of Southwest Foundation. And when she left, she really didn't give me any directives about how to run the foundation. She literally only told me to do one thing, and it was to stay involved with the Conference of Southwest Foundations, and so I got involved.
My predecessor, Heather Palacios, was involved in PSW, and so when I took the mantle from her to become the new executive director of the Kretz Family Foundation, that was one of the conferences that I saw on the list of conferences she had already attended. PSW seems like the right place to start my philanthropic journey because it's almost like I'm learning while also driving the ship. And so I wanted to make sure that I was surrounding myself with people in the philanthropic landscape that were doing really great work.
I came to PSW because part of my work is to build those relationships across the country at a national level, at a regional level, and at a local level. These are folks I can call on, or my colleagues can call on, when we're trying to find out information or we're trying to share information about the issue that we're dealing with, but they help us connect the dots.
PSW has been a large, extended family, welcoming newcomers with open arms, never hesitant to share knowledge, eager to help make connections, and be a ready resource for its members to call on.
My first conference with PSW was in Oklahoma. Being able to participate in Family Pictures was a really good experience for me to be vulnerable in front of peers and tell my story of growing up and the barriers that I faced. And then when I got off that stage, being able to have so many folks come up and say, thank you for sharing, or hey, you know what, I experienced that too when I was a kid or younger. It made me feel more at home, more accepted, more of the family of the PSW network.
When I think about PSW and I think about the aspect of family, it really is true. I see Abel and Ben, we all met in 2021 at my first conference when we were doing a conversation around like our families, and we were showing old photos of our families. Every time we see each other, it's like a big family gathering of how are you, how's life, what's going on in your world, what's exciting, what are some of the challenges. And it truly feels like Abel and Ben have embraced me as an executive director and a new executive director at that.
I was a shop of two people, myself and my administrative assistant. And when you have these really small teams, you feel kind of like you're on an island. And the thing that I learned and was really the most passionate about was the fact that this community was so giving and sharing. And that really stuck out to me as something that made this sector very unique. I think that there's a tremendous amount of kindness in this space, and we don't see a lot of that in America today.
I became involved in PSW relatively early in my career at Episcopal Health Foundation. We were looking for opportunities to network and collaborate with other philanthropies and to make ourselves known within the philanthropic community, and so Philanthropy Southwest served as a good forum to be able to do that. I found people to be very forthcoming. I think that it was very much a giving culture. I also found Amy Meadows and have now become great friends.
That foundation of caring, generosity, friendship, and camaraderie has helped PSW to weather the turbulent changes in the field of philanthropy and the challenges of staying relevant in spite of that turbulence.
PSW's evolution really stemmed from the fact that we were the first PSO, philanthropic serving organization in the country. And we developed really rich traditions, and people liked those traditions. Our members really did. And so change was not always very easy for the organization. But obviously there's been a huge change in the field.
But I think what Philanthropy Southwest has done is it's grown its leadership in terms of its board of trustees, its board of directors. It's more diverse ethnically, it's more diverse in thought, it's more diverse in philosophy. That helps change come about. And so they've been intentional about trying to bring a diverse set of leadership to the table so that they can change and that they can step forward.
I looked at this as a startup, a reimagined Philanthropy Southwest. And that was what the directive that the board gave me as well, was to really reimagine and think about this as honoring a legacy, but let's reimagine what the future could look like altogether. And it's been great. Our vision at Philanthropy Southwest is a thriving Southwestern U.S. through the power of philanthropy. And that's a big vision. You know, philanthropy is hard work, but as a community of philanthropists, it is so important that we laugh together. It is so important that we celebrate the wins, that we comfort one another in the challenges that we have, that we learn from one another.
Laughing together and sharing moments of fun and celebration have always been a staple of Philanthropy Southwest. These moments have deepened the bonds and cement the friendships, which make the work just a little lighter.
And they like to have recreational time together. And they had an award called the Olay Award for the individual in the group that brought the most fun to the party. Used to have Oldsmans that would bring a song book to meetings, and at 10 o'clock at night they break out the song book.
I was a part of Next Gen Philanthropists. They had a program for us, and we had a scavenger hunt around the Broadmoor Hotel, and it was so much fun and lots of laughs running around the Broadmoor we had to do silly tasks and we had to find things. I know the Broadmoor pretty well now, but what was really the big takeaway was the friendships I made, and they threw us into teams and we tried to win, and my team won, and that was a lot of fun.
A couple of years in a row, I went to Foundations on the Hill. I had to go to visit the New Mexico senators, and there was only one other person who funded in New Mexico. And she went with me, and she was super nice, super organized. I couldn't have done it without her. And so we had our routine. I introduced her, said hello. She had these folders made that we had put together with information in them. And she handed the folder to him like we had done a couple of times before. And the senator leaned back and put his leg up and opened it up and made a funny face, and he pulled out another flat pack and waved it up. It was a pair of brand new pantyhose. And he went, "Is this a bribe?" Thankfully, he was joking. And we both were, my friend was really beet red, and so was I. And he goes, "I'm keeping them." So he put them in his folder and kept them. So we went back and told people, and everybody said, probably they remember our visit more than anyone else's.
And that's a part of also building that trusted relationships aspect. You don't build trusted relationships just in a cold conference room, right? You build that over food, over drink, in conversation, over a cup of coffee. And I think it's important that we continue to have as much fun as possible while we're working and learning on very, very serious issues that we're trying to solve.
Baby boomers are about to transfer $68 trillion in wealth over the next several decades to family members, to friends, to organizations. What does that mean for us as a society?
There's not a lot of Hispanic individuals in the roles that I'm in right now. Being able to have the resources and the professional development opportunities that PSW affords helps me excel in my role, but also lift up my story and hopefully to see more Hispanic, Latino representation in this field.
I like the people. I come back for the people. I come back because I think they're serious. I think they're trying to make a difference. I think they're trying to adapt. I think they're trying to grow and change. I think they're trying to be responsive to their members, and that only helps us.
As Philanthropy Southwest looks ahead to the next 75 years, it's in good hands. With a clear vision of where it's going, built on a solid foundation that has stood the test of time, with many friends who are crazy and doing things to provide reassurance and look out for the welfare of all who call the Southwest home.
Think about the challenges that our society is facing continually, and so philanthropy has to be more proactive, less responsive to needs. And so how does Philanthropy Southwest help our foundations take lead in their communities and not just respond to needs in their communities? And I think us being able to start being seen as a resource for that is a really important point for our organization. I think also trust. How do we build a greater trust? In the next 75 years, how can we create both a trust between grant makers, but a trust between grantees and grant makers by the way that they do grant making? How can we build a sense of community that helps drive forward the goals of seeing big problems solved and eradicated? We have for 75 years kept the spirit of pioneering within Southwestern philanthropy, and I hope that remains, that we're never satisfied, that there's always more need, and that we need to do whatever we can to meet that need.